Welcome back to VMworld 2013. This is live coverage in San Francisco, California. We're in Moscone South Lobby. This is theCUBE. This is our flagship program where we go out to the events, extract the signal from the noise. I'm John Furrier, the founder of SiliconANGLE. I'm joined by my co-host in this segment, Stu Miniman, and our guest, Martin Casado. Your new title is Chief Architect of Networking at VMware. Also the founder of Nicira, obviously the major acquisition that kind of changed the game. We were talking earlier. Welcome back to theCUBE. Great to have you again.
Hey, it's great to be here, always.
Pat Gelsinger just said Nicira was a shot heard around the IT world, and you know, certainly virtualization has never been going away. It's only been getting better and more geeky. Under the hood, it's the engine that's powering the car of innovation, instrumentation with big data, applications, new stuff, it's upgrades coming, it's moving so fast. You guys really were an inflection point that enabled the software-defined enterprise, everything, the data center. Obviously networking, there's a lot of action being done. We've talked about that in the past. So, I got to ask you, what's it like now, a year later, the game's changing, all the messaging, software-defined data center, hybrid cloud, end-user computing is being enabled by a software construct that is based in foundation around the work that you did.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fantastic. I think when you do a journey like, you start with an idea, and then you do kind of the engineering work, and then you kind of build an organization around it and so forth. I mean, like everything has its stage in the life cycle. And when you're a startup, a lot of what you're doing is it's education and evangelism and kind of early sales, and you end up with these kind of, I always call it the magic bean pitch. You ready? So like, when you're a startup and you've got something new and it's a disruptive technology, the pitch to the customer is like, I've got these magic beans, and if you take these magic beans and you plant them in the backyard, they're going to grow into a beanstalk, and like I promise at the top there's going to be like gold and so forth, right? So it's this very evangelical
Selling
way.
the dream.
Yeah, it really is, right? And it's like kind of customer by customer, and it's a lot of work because people don't understand this, and it's new, and it doesn't really exist yet. So there's a lot of faith, and there's a lot of evangelism. What's been really wonderful about the last year is, VMware is a phenomenal organization. It's got a huge customer base, 500,000 some odd VMware customers, and so what we do is we get to take a product and a technology, we get to have a sales force, we get to have conversations with customers, which is very different. So instead of saying, I've got these magic beans, and if you take these magic beans and plant them, we say, listen, we already work together, you already use our bits, you have problems in the networking, so let's work together to solve these problems. We can be very much customer-led, and we can work directly with them instead of like having to develop these new relationships.
So Martin, it really seems almost it's gone from kind of the revolution discussion to, in the keynote you talked about a radical evolution. So is that a fair statement?
Well, I think it's the nature of the association, right? Which is, when you're in a startup, you don't have like that relationship, you don't have that trust, and so, so much of what you're doing is new and it's educational, it's building it, but from VMware, I mean, it's a very, very trusted company where we already have the bits, we already have the software, we already have the support infrastructure, we already have the sales channel, we already have the education and the content, so it's more about working with the customer to evolve it. It's a very different motion, but I think it's really necessary to take technologies and make them mainstream. And listen, this is all about making this stuff mainstream.
All right, so Martin, last year when you were on theCUBE, we feel like we're watching this mature together, as we said.
That's right.
You banged on the table, said, we're going to transform networking. Talked about how, open source projects, need to be, more important than kind of the standards. You're doing a lot with open source still. OpenStack, of course, is a huge engagement, but want to talk, where are you guys putting your energy in open source? I saw some comments that Open Daylight didn't seem like a lot of energy, kind of watching it, and OpenStack. Can you give us the update as to where you guys are putting your coding effort and your manpower?
Yeah, sure. So we've actually, on projects like Open vSwitch, which again is a project very near and dear to my heart, we've actually doubled the number of people working on it. And we work on things that are core to our mission, which is building the best virtual switch out there, but we also work on a number of other areas like OpenFlow support that, right now we're very close to 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 OpenFlow support. We don't necessarily use all of it, but I think it's very good for the industry, and I think it's very good for software-defined networking in general. So open vSwitch is definitely an area we put a lot of effort into. We've also, I think, more than doubled the amount of developers that are working on OpenStack is another effort that we work in. And at the same time, we still engage in trying to identify standards and APIs so you can build ecosystem around these things.
Martin, we've always said, in fact, we started when we interviewed you at OpenStack Summit, one of the things that we observed and then commented later is that the open source communities are now the standards bodies. And it's pretty clear that contributing code is now a way to get stuff ratified. Just push code, vote with your code.
Right, that's right.
And so I got to ask you a question. Why do you think OpenStack has been so successful? I mean, it's a framework, Pat Gelsinger calls it a framework, huge initiative, people are rallying around it. Why is it being adopted so successfully from a mind share standpoint and also from an activity standpoint?
No, that's a great question. So listen, I'm a huge fan of OpenStack. And I think that when we try and evaluate the industry around it and we try to think about what's going on, I think it's just as important to look at what's driving the adoption as what's being adopted itself. And I think in the case of OpenStack, there's this huge vacuum, which is a need for a composable framework where you can take best of breed components or open source components and mix and match them to build your own orchestration and cloud management platform. I mean, I think in general, we want to move infrastructure from hardware into software. And in hardware, the interfaces are atoms, right? So like you kind of know like where the edge of like a desk is or the edge of a cup is, and you kind of fix these things together in a simple way. But when you move into software, if you want to mix and match and make composable systems, we need to have very well-defined interfaces. And I think the positioning that OpenStack took is, listen, we're a framework of open interfaces that anybody can plug into. And this is the type of erector set we need. And it was a governance model, which is the kind of governance model we need to have industry participation. And so I think it's that need that people were really drawn to, and this is why it's been so successful.
And on the enterprise side, it's not too easy to build a cloud. I mean, I have a lot of legacy, and we talked to Sean Douglas earlier with Service Mesh, they bridge legacy and new apps, and CIOs we talk to say, I like OpenStack because it gives me a warm and fuzzy, it gets a security blanket. We were mentioning a binky for them, and, not to use the baby analogy. I'm getting killed today on analogies, but for a CIO, they see Amazon disrupting, they see what it does with shadow IT, and they see OpenStack as hope, but yet you got CloudStack out there, you got some other things, but OpenStack seems to resonate with the CIOs. What's your take on that customer perspective and why they're reacting that way?
Yeah, sure, and I mean, I'm probably going to repeat a lot of what I just said, but I think it's actually worth reiterating, which is, with OpenStack is this promise of actually having composable software elements, and this is what we need for infrastructure. If we're going to move into a realm where we're moving infrastructure into software, we want these Lego pieces that we can mix and match. And part of the core messaging of OpenStack from the very beginning was, we want open interfaces, we want composable interfaces, and we want broad industry participation. So we're going to do a consortium approach, not, for example, a single company approach. And I think for anybody that's viewing these public clouds as the goal of where I want to be, and it's something that I want to control the way I get there by managing my own assets, this is a great message. I think it's a great platform to use.
George Kadif at HP, who's now running the software group, ex-Silver Lake executive, who's on Oracle, is just a great executive. We interviewed him and we asked him about OpenStack. We asked him a question, what are you most excited about? Just a general question, a normal CUBE question. He goes, I'm excited about OpenStack. And I go, why? He goes, because no one vendor lock-in, no one vendor controls it.
Right.
And he goes, do you believe in open source? He goes, yes, it's not about free, it's about freedom. And I think that is an interesting line. Coming from an executive at that level, that is about the freedom of choice. So functionality and lock-in aren't mutually exclusive. You can have some little bit of lock-in, if the function's there, that's cool, but if it's open, you still got choice.
Yeah, that's right. And I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is as long as you know when you're taking something that's not standardized, as long as you know that, you can make a choice on whether you want to or not. So for me, the most important aspect of OpenStack, there's two very important aspects. The first one is community. No project exists without community, and really projects are really the sum of the community around them. It's a great community, they've done great work, it's very diverse, and it's really exciting. There's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of debates. It feels healthy, right? Community, and the second one is the basic principles are around open interfaces, and this is what we want.
Martin, we could pivot to that discussion and talk about NSX.
Sure.
Because we talked about VMware really becoming more of a networking player, but you're not going to do that alone. You have partnerships.
Of course,
you're working to bring up an analogy. Some have said that we're now entering the networking Cold War because it's Cisco's vision of application-centric infrastructure and VMware's vision. We've had Brocade, Juniper, we're having Cumulus on today, all siding as to how they're integrating with NSX, and Cisco was notably absent. So can you talk to us, what's the reality? Is your team working with Cisco and NCME, and the partners? How does VMware's role in the networking growth versus the ecosystem, how does that all line up, and at your level,
Sure.
what do you say?
Yeah, I think it's really important to say that it's very important for us to partner with all of the networking hardware vendors. We don't do networking hardware, we will never do networking hardware. We want to integrate on open interfaces with all of them, and we do, we have various partnerships. And in fact, it's undeniable that our partnership with Cisco is the deepest of any, given the level of access that they've had to vSphere, the level of integration that we've had in things like VCE, right? And so, we have varying announcements of varying degrees, and the one that we did today was actually top of rack integration around a very specific product with NSX. But that's not meant to make a statement about who is preferred or who is not preferred. I mean, as we go through alliances, and as we go through partnering, we want to partner with everybody, right? I mean, we're open to partnering with everybody, and it's just, depending on logistics, we're on different points in these partnering tracks.
Right, so, can NSX be successful without Cisco at the table?
Well, I think NSX in managing the virtual layer, absolutely, because it is independent of a hardware vendor. It's just like, today VMware has vSwitches and has virtual ports, and it adds functionality in those. It has vShelled Edge, and these can be totally successful, independent of any sort of deep integration. I think that customers benefit through tight integration. Yeah. And I think that, as customers demand these things, we do this type of work.
So one of the nuanced things that I saw in NSX that is getting lost a little bit is NSX can actually work across multiple hypervisors.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Open vSwitch, was there, but when it's branded VMware, it's a little bit of a different discussion. Yeah. So, how is the work on different hypervisors, different than when you were separate? I mean, I think we talked a year ago is working and integrating with ESX.
Yeah.
Obviously it's a lot easier now, but on the other hand, has it changed the relationships with the other hypervisors? What do you see in KVM and Hyper-V
Yeah,
these
sure.
days?
No, this is a great question. So just to be very, very clear, and I think Pat did a very good job when he did the keynote on this, which is, NSX is a multi-hypervisor, multiple cloud management system product. I'm a huge believer, as I just talked about OpenStack, in horizontal integration. I always have been. It's fundamental in my system's roots, right? So multiple cloud management stacks, multiple hypervisors. Right? And we've continued to do this work. We've continued to have customers that deploy in multiple types of environments. So, that is from a positioning of the product, that's from a support of the product perspective. But, it's also worth looking at the logistics of the development cycle. When you control all the bits, you don't have to have consensus to make changes. And so we have a little bit faster innovation speeds because, we control it, we do the release. And so, for example, when we do things in Open vSwitch, especially at the kernel level, it's got to be upstreamed into the Linux kernel. And because we do everything open and everything that we want to upstream, then we have to make sure that we're following the correct process and architecting in a way that makes sense for the community. And so I think you'll see mildly different velocity speeds on the data path, but the goal is always going to be full feature compatibility on all platforms.
The future of the data center is obviously the big messaging, software-defined data center, and obviously Pat's all in. I mean, he spent $1 billion on your company, but the shift that happened, the shot heard around IT's comment is interesting because we've been doing theCUBE here, it's our 4th VMworld, so we've kind of seen the evolution of the tech conversation, the business positioning, and this shift is really happening. And I got to ask you about the other elements, storage and compute.
Yeah.
Because the compute thing came up in the future of IT. If compute is everywhere and there's unused capacity, what does that look like? And that's kind of, I think, Andreessen Horowitz's, or Mark Andreessen's perspective is, with virtualization, you can do some new things.
Yeah.
Storage and compute are two areas that are being disrupted as well. What's your take on those, and what is networking interfacing? If it's converged, they got to see some interplay. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so let me answer the last question first, which is, so I think that there's a real temptation to conflate network virtualization and storage virtualization, which is if we virtualize the network, then we're virtualizing the substrate that goes to storage, and as a result, we actually get storage virtualization. So this is my personal opinion. I'm of the opinion that's the wrong systematic approach. So what I like to say is, you have to virtualize everything at its own layer where you have as much context in the semantics as possible, right? And so I believe that it's the job of the hypervisor to virtualize storage, and it can connect to that storage system however it wants. And so from the perspective of a guest, the storage that it's seeing is coming directly from the hypervisor, and the network is being virtualized through a network virtualization subsystem. But this allows the hypervisor to connect through the storage using direct physical mechanisms without actually having to have virtual networking. So I think the two things actually work very well together, depending on how the system is architected. I also agree that there's a much larger disruption that's going on in virtualization of all infrastructure, and we're still kind of coming to grips on what it means as these things operate within the same context, not just around how do they integrate, but like once you start giving this flexibility to workloads, how often are we going to be shooting ourselves in the foot, right? I mean, storage always comes back, shared storage always comes back to these cache consistency problems, and it's not clear to me that we've kind of handled this at an application perspective. So I think there's a lot of work still to do.
Martin, so looking forward, we know it's still early days in this adoption. It was great to see some customers out there.
Yeah.
Critique I'd say is those were really big customers, so Citi, GE, and the like. We'd like to see it go down market a little bit.
Sure.
What should people be watching for? What milestones are going to show that we're really getting broader adoption through the enterprise and maturing the stack as we go forward?
Yeah, that's a great, so let me actually just address the point that you made, which is, I mean, when it comes to press, and it comes to marketing, and it comes to positioning, you want to have the strongest position possible, right? And so, I mean, I think that the ability to, bring these very large cross-vertical companies on stage is a large testament. And I don't think that's it's a position on, these are the only guys that you can sell to. We've had almost an customer announcement a month that's both up market and down market. And so, given whatever 17 minutes that we had on stage, right? There's only so many people we can cram up there. But I do agree that we're still in the early adopter phase. I think that we're still pre-chasm and we're hitting the chasm right now. And so I think that it's not so much as the size, but where they are in the adoption cycle. And the way that we know, I think it's going to be purely numbers. Right? So I think we've already moved across verticals, right? I mean, even on stage we had, new service provider, we had kind of blue of the blue chips, and we had a financial institution. And I think moving forward, it'll be nice when we see not only these early adopters of these different verticals, but we actually move into kind of more of the late adopters.
Great, so wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your team for a second. I'm sure there was a lot of pressure getting this out. Did you guys do a big celebration? And how much pressure is there on you guys to deliver on that promise from a $1 billion acquisition?
Well, first of all, the team. I work with the best team on the planet. Like seriously, I'm so lucky. I love the guys I work with, all of them. And I mean, even when I did research, honestly, I always prefer, I was always much more interested in the teams that I was working with and the topics that I was working on. It's the same, network virtualization is great, and SDN is great, and it's my passion, it's why I wake up in the morning, but like, doing it with the team I have now has been phenomenal. But what's great, again, like I tried to describe before, the world has shifted. From before the evangelical kind of hard sales pitch where there is a lot of pressure and you don't have the relationships and you have to build this all, you have to scrape it out with your own hands, to now where these are conversations that we have with our customers and these are directly, and we're helping them and we're working together. So you see progress every day, you feel very constructive, you're not doing these cliffhangers, and so it's not really pressure, it's about execution now. So we're focused on execution. I think we do a great job working together to do it.
Martin, I got to ask you about the show here, obviously VMworld. What's your perspective of going on? Share with the audience out there. You're in the trenches, you have a lot of passion, you wake up, you're awesome, and you have a lot of experience
I am awesome.
And knowledge, and you're a tech athlete, as we say. So I got to ask you, share with the folks what's happening at the show. What's the true signal out of this show from a tech perspective, and then what gets you excited? What trend and what tech gets you the most excited right now?
Okay, good. So, my title's kind of changed within VMware. I was chief architect and then sometimes CTO, and right now I'm kind of more in the CTO, but it turns out I'm actually a really bad CTO. I'm CTO of networking. Turns out I'm actually a really bad CTO. So, I think that, vision, especially in SDN, has got its place and it's really important, but I think now we're at a spot where it's now time to operationalize, and it's time to educate, and it's time to have good proof points. And so, for the NSX announcement, really, it wasn't so much a vision announcement as it's here, people are using it, we've got a broad ecosystem, right? And then, we've got a concrete roadmap going forward, and here are the steps for you to engage the technology. So VMworld, in relationship to the NSX announcement, hopefully it's around kind of these very kind of concrete steps to move forward, right? I think, VMworld more broadly and the messaging more broadly, there's a lot of focus on the software-defined data center clearly, and I think it's also in very much the same realm, which is these kind of very concrete ways to move forward, but it's happening, and customers are adopting it.
What about the some of the ecosystem partners? Are they kind of shifting as well? I mean, also we hear software-defined storage is big within the storage guys, and then HP and others have huge announcements as well. What's going on in the ecosystem? What's under the hood that's driving? Is it Flash? Is it some of the software approaches? What's under the hood?
So I'm going to be honest, I'm the wrong guy to ask about storage because I don't do a lot with storage, but I think ecosystem around networking, it's very clear, right? I mean, coming with, what was it, 5 or 6 partners, deep integration, and like I mentioned in one of my talks, and it's true, so like, one of the dirty secrets in the Valley is anytime you want to do a press release, and you really don't have anything to put on it, like you don't have customers or whatever, you just stick on a whole bunch of logos, because everybody wants to be part of a press release, it's free press, and you don't really have to do any work, right? It's true, right? So you're like, oh man, I want to launch my company, I want to launch my product, nobody's using it, probably doesn't exist yet, so like, you just go around the Valley to all these companies, say, hey, do you want to put it a part of a press release? And everybody says yes, and they stick their logos on, right? This happens all the time. So, as far as the ecosystem...
we don't cover those.
So, but as far as the, as far as the ecosystem that we're working with now, I mean, there's real deep integration work that's being demoed here today, so this is not just a bunch of people jumping on a bandwagon, it's actually showing real integration work.
And I said, Martine, great to have you on theCUBE. I'll give you the final word. What's your plans for this year? What's your big ideas that you're going to be drilling down? Is it going to be tactical? Is it going to be exploring new ground? Or?
Bad CTO. I'm really focused on how do we bring this product into customers' hands, how do we operationalize it, and how do we move it forward?
Well, congratulations, you guys have really certainly changed the industry. I mean, you're a data point, but that was a sea change that happened with software defined. You guys have been great success, and bringing it to reality seems to be the top job. Congratulations, great to have you on theCUBE.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
SiliconANGLE's theCUBE. We'll be right back with our next guest after this short break. We're going to have Bill Fathers, the SVP, here coming in, we're going to talk hybrid cloud, so we'll be right back after this short break.